Okay, this is another episode of the Critical Introverts podcast. I'm your host, Senor Filth. I might be flying solo today, but that's fine. I have a guest today, Brian Kenner, part of the Zeal Brothers. If you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Brian. In the Zeal Brothers, we have a YouTube channel, and we're focusing on a masculine Christian focus, pushing masculinity, pushing strong men, pushing Christianity, and then pushing our art kind of in those three directions of masculinity, Christianity, and art, and focusing on that and,
Mm-hmm.
putting a good message out there.
All right, so I guess let's start it off. I mean, you're a pastor. Uh, how did that whole thing start?
Well, my dad is a pastor, and
Uh-huh.
he for a long time when I was a child, I was resistant. I didn't want to be a pastor because I saw how bad it was. A lot of people don't, they see they see the pastor speaking
Uh-huh.
and they think it's all good. And they don't see, some of the church politics, stuff that people, a lot of people tell you why they don't go to church. You see
Uh-huh.
that too, but you see it from the other side. And, it's just one of those things you see too much sometimes. And I saw a situation where my dad helped put a marriage back together.
Mm-hmm.
And then those people, a year later they left and act like my dad did anything for them. It's just stuff like that left a bad taste in my mouth.
Mm-hmm.
But slowly but surely, God built in me a love for His people,
Cool.
and I started to put those bitternesses behind me and started to see the greater purpose. And so eventually, I was called into the ministry, and now I've been a pastor at my church under my father. And that
Mm-hmm.
was another battle whether I would be under him or not. I submitted to God's will, and now I'm under Him, and I'm having a great time with it.
Was there any specific moment that you remember that like kind of brought you back? Was there any um like you said you're away from it or you kind of resisted the idea of becoming a pastor? Was there a moment or anything that you can remember that kind of made you realize that this is the path that you want to go into?
Nothing specific. It was like 100 small things.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it was just I would see somebody else teaching, and I would know that I should be doing that. Other times it would be somebody preaching a sermon,
Mm-hmm.
and I would have more of a critical eye towards it, not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily being negative, but just seeing how it could be done better, how it could be done more effectively. And
Mm-hmm.
so, and I was looking at it. I started to realize I was looking at it from the inside already.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't change that mindset. I was already thinking about it as how do we speak better? How do we preach better? How do we lead better?
Mm-hmm.
And so I was already including myself in that we, and God had already changed my mind.
Mm-hmm. Is
And
there
I
any
didn't even.
yeah? Is there anything that you disagree with as far as uh, the things that other pastors do or they teach or anything like that?
Yeah, I call it Christian simping. And most people know what simping is. That's when you cater to
Mm-hmm.
a woman to the extent that you are belittling yourself to try to get with her.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of churches do this, right? They belittle themselves and they'll say, "Oh, anything to get somebody in the door." Well, I'm not like that.
Mm-hmm.
And my mentality is, the message is what the message is. I want you to come, but I'm not going to change the message to get you to come. I want you to come for the right reasons. And if you understand what Christianity is, it's a high calling. And you may not like every part of it. It's not always pleasant. It's not meant to be.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I'm not going to preach a prosperity gospel for you to come into church,
Mm-hmm.
but you will be enlightened and your life will be enriched. So in that extent, I'm against some of the pastors. I'm against some of the pastors who preach like a message of just love and don't preach a message of judgment.
Mm-hmm.
Love is definitely part of it, but it's almost like preaching about Superman, but not, preaching about Lois Lane falling down a 50-story building.
Yeah,
There's no
yeah.
need for Superman if you're not falling off the building. And so we don't talk about sin, so there's no need for salvation. So I'm definitely, opposed to that. So those are probably the two main things that I'm
Mm-hmm.
concerned with: a focus on truth, and then, a desire to actually have people come for the right reasons instead of something towards them.
um, how would you um I put this? How would you go about like getting people to start to listen to your sermons or to become interested in going to your church? Is there anything specifically? I guess I mean your brother's comic would probably be one thing to promote that promotes your preaching. Um, is there? Oh, go ahead.
I think when you're talking about promoting preaching, what I like to do is have real conversations with people and answer their objections, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think the thing that appeals to people is the preaching convincing? In other words, does it have an appeal? Is it persuasive? Is it charisma? Does the person speaking have charisma? Does he have talent enough to speak in front of me? Do I want to listen to him? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can have as much theological richness as you want in your sermon, but if everybody fell asleep, it didn't matter, right? So there has to be some kind of element where you keep the audience engaged. We have that.
Mm-hmm.
The next thing you need to have is a rational argument. People are tired of going to churches where there's an emotional appeal, but they don't understand the reasons for why you're doing what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
I think making that rational argument, it appeals to people. And when you make the rational argument with skill, you're going to get people. So, we definitely have a number of draws like art and things like that. But the biggest thing is just doing what the church should do well.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do that, people will come.
That's interesting. I guess let's go into a topic that you kind of wanted to bring up was just promoting excellence, Christian art promoting excellence. I mean, there's your brother's comic. Is there any other, forms of media that you guys delve into that promotes like just excellence through art?
Yeah, I mean, we delving in everything. So we've written 12 plays together.
Oh.
And in these plays, they mainly are focused. They're mainly comedies.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, we're writing a musical. Right now, it's the first musical we've ever done. So we're going to see how that goes. But the idea is that you want to make entertainment that doesn't compromise. You want it to be Christian entertainment. It shouldn't compromise on the Christianity. Shouldn't compromise on the entertainment. And both of them should be brought together in such a way that the person will take in the message, even if he doesn't like it, because he likes the art.
Yeah.
And so I have an uncle who's, an atheist. Maybe I should say he's agnostic, right? He's agnostic. He doesn't really accept the Christian view, but he loves our plays. And so he'll just say that they promote family values. But it's pushing Jesus. That's what he's doing, right? But he'll just say it's promoting family values because he likes the plays. And so in his mind, he'll make an excuse for why he likes it. And it's just well done art. So the play is one way. My brother's comic book is definitely another way. We're making a video game where the character is gritty and real. And so that's another way. But whatever you do, you want to have an element of creativity, realism, and truth. And I think if you have those three, you'll have good Christian art. When you don't have one of those three, then nobody wants to see it anywhere.
Yeah, I mentioned when I had your brother on, like there's a stigma with a lot of Christian entertainment that it comes off a little too goody. I mean, I guess I have you on, like, how do you guys avoid coming off like that? I guess like one of your plays, for example, like how do you keep it from becoming, too safe and, goody.
I think one of the things you have to do is you got to avoid the cliche moments. One of the cliche moments is you got to avoid the time where everybody falls down and cries and prays, right?
Yeah.
Because that's not reflective in most people's lives of how they got saved. Some people do get saved that way, but when it happens, it's shocking and we almost don't believe it. So even if you do have your characters do that, you got to portray something different to show that they've changed. The other thing is you got to show if they are changing. Well, first off, every play can't be focused on everybody getting saved. Everybody can't. And I think that's one thing you do to avoid it. The other one is not all good endings for everybody. So you got to have some bad endings for some people. Some people didn't listen to the truth, and you see what happens in their life.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe not a complete disaster. It's not like the guy who's the bad character got divorced, his wife got hit by a bus, and he lost his business. I mean, everything bad happened just because you made a character that you love to hate. No,
Yeah.
right? And so when you make your story that cliche, it's so thin and it's so unrealistic, people can't connect with it.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, make characters that people feel like, bro, that's me, or that's Bob. You know, that's Sue. That's somebody that I know is in this play.
Yeah,
And somebody that you know is in that play, then all of a sudden you get drawn in, and that's where the realism should come. The realism should come is I identify with what happened in that play.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so when you have the dispute between the good guy and the bad guy, don't make the bad guy a straw man. Make
Mm-hmm.
him the best man, right?
Mm-hmm.
Make him good at what he does. Make him make some arguments that the Christian has a hard time. People in the audience should be like, man, how do I answer that? And don't always have the good guy have a good answer to it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he got to rely on say, man, I just believe by faith.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a good answer? No, it's not. But sometimes we're left with that, right?
Yeah.
And leave it at that and let people be uncomfortable. And sometimes people might say, yeah, you know, how come you didn't make the character say that? He didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
He's not perfect.
Is there any as far as for your plays, or is there any you know, filmmakers or anything like that that you guys kind of take influence from, or any storytellers in general?
Yeah, I mean, our biggest influencers are not Christian.
Mm-hmm. Like who
So
would be?
Walt Disney is a big one. I'm not talking about like Disney stuff that's made now, but I'm talking
Yeah,
about you know, George Lucas is a big influence on us. Um, you know, Miyazuki, who made Princess Mononoke and those other animes,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
big influence on us. The guy who made Berserk, big influence on us. The guy who made Gantz, big influence on us. So we like realism. Some of my favorite, like my favorite author is L.E. Modesitt Jr. He writes sci-fi and fantasy, and he's an atheist.
Mm.
He always, at some point in his book, will take some shot at religion. Every
Mm-hmm.
book.
Mm-hmm.
But I still love it because his characters have a realism to them. Now, I think that the way that they go at religion, they create a straw man in it, and I feel like I can counter his arguments, but I still like the fact that his characters are dealing with good and evil and trying to judge that, but not always having, you know, solid white and black lines
Yeah.
to tell them what good and evil are.
Yeah.
So I get all my influences mainly from non-Christian artists, mainly because I don't see a lot of good Christian artists, to be tell you the truth.
Yeah.
At least none I want to emulate.
Yeah. It's interesting that you bring up George Lucas, because you know who Joseph Campbell is?
I'm not familiar.
He's I can't think of where he's totally from, but he's a guy who is he's known because he takes stories from different cultures around the world, and he kind of boils down like why these stories work on a subconscious level. So he brings up like stories in Christianity and stuff like that, just why like the hero tropes work. And George Lucas, for the original Star Wars, actually based a lot of like the story of Star Wars on his teachings, on his writings. So I mean, if there's anybody which I would recommend checking out, it'd be Joseph Campbell, because he's just someone that knows. He'll bring up things of like you know, even stories within Christianity and why they just speak to people on a very subconscious level without it being preachy. Just, you know, why people are engaged with these stories, why stories of hope and you know, coming from a low point to overconquer that, why that speaks to us. Really interesting guy. I would definitely recommend you check him out. I mean, maybe you could do a sermon on him or something like that.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I gotta check that out.
Yeah. You mentioned that you guys are doing a video game. I mean, is there any you can share about that? Because it's the first time I'm hearing about it.
Yeah, well, we got an RPG that we're making,
Mm-hmm.
and the premise of the story is that without telling the audience this, it's a fantasy world that's kind of based on our fantastic view of the world before the flood, right?
Mm.
None of the biblical characters in it. It doesn't have anything to do with the flood or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's just this fantasy world. And in this world, there's these gardens that have these forbidden fruits in them.
Hmm.
And when you take this fruit of the tree of knowledge, you get blessed with like these huge magical powers that the human body can't even contain.
Yeah.
So it's kind of premised on that. The main character is a character who, you know how like in the Bible it talks about like the sons of God saw the daughters of men and they were beautiful. And a lot of people, you know, say were the angels sleeping with some of the human women.
Mm-hmm.
And later on, it talks about giants being born and stuff like that. So, is that where the giants came from? Is it where these people with fantastic powers came from?
Mm-hmm.
And so, I'm not sure that I fully buy into all that, but as far as a basis for fantasy, it works.
Hmm.
So, I use that, and we're using that as kind of a premise for our fantasy world. And then we just put our characters in there and just make them have to deal with that world.
Hmm.
And it's cool. We have a script written. I got the story. Right now, all I'm doing right now is writing the story. I got the story, I would say about 2/3 of the way done,
Mm-hmm.
scripted and everything. So it's going pretty good. And now I need to get to the part where I'm starting finishing the story and then getting the program.
Do
But it's fine.
you have a vision as to like how the game would look as far as?
Yeah, it's gonna have an old school look. It's gonna look like Final Fantasy VI. I don't know if you're more familiar with that, or like if you remember the game Xenogears. Kind of
Yeah.
like hand drawn. Let me think
Okay,
of it. Maybe Chrono Trigger. You remember Chrono Trigger?
I can Google it. Chrono
Yeah,
Trigger. Chrono
So
Trigger.
like
Oh, okay, so it's okay. I got it.
you see how like the characters are hand drawn, but
Yeah,
like
yeah.
supposed to be well done. So it's gonna have like an
Very cool.
old school look to it, and it's going to be kind of like kind of like almost a Final Fantasy VII type battle.
Hmm.
So it's gonna be interesting. We'll see how it goes because the amount of programming that's gonna be necessary to make this game is a high barrier. But I think we can do it. If we can do it, it's gonna be good. It's a Christian message in it, but it's not fully focused on a Christian message, if that makes sense. So the main character starts off as like a drug dealer,
Mm-hmm.
and he eventually does become what we would consider to be saved, but there is no um he won't put it in terms.
Hmm.
And he does change throughout the story. Other people stay the same. But he has this party where some of the people believe, and he even has atheists in his party. They'll even have debates within his party
Mm-hmm.
about who God is and things like that. So um it's going to be an interesting story that does explore Christianity, but just again, almost in a different way. You're going to just be in a good RPG, and it just so happens that
Mm-hmm.
that's a topic that they bring up.
Is there gonna be like a combat system, or is it just
Yeah, it's
okay?
going to be a full combat system. It's going to be kind of like, um, you know how like in Final, have you played Final Fantasy VII?
No, I kind of I know what you're talking about, but I've
Yeah,
never played it.
Final Fantasy VII is kind of to me is one of the better battle systems for RPGs, in
Mm-hmm.
a sense that you have three characters and you have an active time battle they call it,
Mm-hmm.
where you have a bar at the bottom where when it fills up you can do your action.
Mm-hmm.
And your actions will you can choose the battle, etc., and you can choose which role your character is going to stand in, and
Mm-hmm.
all these things affect the battle. And so we're going to kind of have a battle system similar to that. Um, and we're going to just work with that. So we kind of have some good concepts with that. And as far as like where the characters stand and how their powers develop and how you develop those characters,
Mm-hmm.
and how you can customize those characters to be, you know, they're gonna be, they're gonna have their roles. You're
Yeah.
not gonna make a healer into a tank. but you're going to be able to modify your healer more to your play style. That's at least the goal.
And you said it takes place pre what was it, pre Noah's Ark?
Pre-flood, yep.
Pre-flood, okay.
Yep,
Right,
pre-Noah's Ark.
So it's gonna be in the so it's gonna be in that kind of what would you call it, like Roman times? Is that correct? Or
No, I wouldn't say Roman times, more like prehistoric, almost fantasy. Legend, times of legend. Where is the Garden of Eden is still there.
okay.
Where people knew where it was. You know what I mean? Like people knew at some point in history, somebody knew where the Garden of Eden was.
Mm-hmm.
They just couldn't get to it because it was guarded by this angel, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so in ours, there's lots of Garden of Eden, but they're all guarded by angels. Mm-hmm. And for you to get in there, you got to defeat these angels to get in there and get that fruit.
So each garden is like a little boss fight to kind of get in there.
Yeah, it's like a boss fight, but it's not necessarily always the good characters that are trying to get these powers, right?
Yeah. Have you guys started any like concept art for it?
We have some concept art on it. Like my brother, he drew a few of the characters. Mm-hmm. So we have a couple of the characters drawn, the main character, and we kind of took it a little bit off our sons. Me and my brother are both in interracial marriages. Mm-hmm. So, our kids are mixed kids. And these characters, the main character is going to look like a mixed guy. He's not going to be black. He's not going to be white. He's mm-hmm. mixed. And, kind of want to portray that because, a lot of times with these characters, they have a certain ethnicity.
Yeah.
I want the character to have ambivalent ethnicity.
So the character starts off as a drug dealer or drug addict, mm-hmm. and then I guess at the end of the game they evolve into what? Or do you have that? Or you don't have that developed?
What happens? He starts off as a drug dealer. He has this ability to infuse elements into stuff. Mm-hmm. That's his power. He got that because you learn throughout the story that that he's descended from angels and men getting together, right? Mm-hmm. And angels all have this power to put elements into things. And so what happens is he doesn't know where he got that power, but he can put elements into drugs. Mm. So when he makes drugs, he can give an effect. Like it could be a shock effect, or it could be a fire effect, or it could be, a wind effect. Whatever that effect might be, he can put the element in it.
Yeah.
And give you a more potent drug. And so because of that, his drugs become something that people seek after. And he starts getting into the gangs. And even though it's a fantasy world, it's kind of still got this, this gang hood element to it at first. But after he gets out of that, it's a disaster that happens where there's a gang war. He barely survives and he has to run away. And he starts to get involved in this resistance army where it's a resistance force. And so now he's going from being a drug dealer to being more of a resistance fighter, right? And there's this part of the game where he's standing up against the government, who is an oppressive government. And he's a resistance fighter, but he's still not completely moral, right? He's doing some good things, but he's not. I wouldn't say he's a Christian.
Yeah.
And he starts to transfer more and more as he starts to see why the world is going the way it's going. Uh-huh. You start to realize even if they replace that government, it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody in charge is going to be good. So it starts to lead to this search for what actually would be good. And you start to unravel some of the conspiracies of the world where, this basically these cultists are leading this world astray. And him and the church is going to put it back to rights.
The boss fights that you have, do you guys have any idea, like, what they're going to be, how the boss fights are going to be? Or are they going to be specifically, you said they were going to be angels, right?
There are going to be angels, but you're rarely going to fight those. Mm-hmm. So there's only going to be 5 fights with angels throughout the whole story. Mm-hmm. Most of the boss fights are going to be with you and just either like when you're in the gang fights, it's going to be another gang member. Mm-hmm. When you get out of that phase and you're in the resistance army, it's going to be part of the empire. Mm-hmm. And then when you get past that, you're going to travel around the world and move out of that empire, and you'll be in other realms, and they have their own governments or they have their own forces. those are going to be the main boss fights. Are going to be people who are like knights and generals from those armies or
Hmm.
monsters that they made
That's cool.
by sacrificing human beings. It's going to be dark. Some are elements going to be dark. Like you sacrifice for them in their system, you get the most spiritual power by sacrificing a human being.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's almost an attempt to explain where human sacrifice even came from. That you can unleash the power of the human spirit. And for them, that's like the equivalent of almost having a nuke. If you could kill enough people, you could blow up a whole city.
Yeah. Do you guys have an idea of what the title of the game is going to be yet? Or
right now, we just got it. We just have a project name of Gardens of Eden.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't know what the final name is going to be yet. I mean, we got names of all the characters and everything, but not the full name.
It's the first time I've actually heard that. Like, when did you guys start? Even when the idea came about?
I want to say maybe it was like 2 years ago. I started sketching out a story, and it was just the structure of a story. It was honestly the story wasn't. It was good, but it wasn't there yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you try to make a story, and you're just like something is missing. Something is missing. So I brought it to my brother, and he changed some elements to it, and all of a sudden it started to click. And the more I started to write it, the more it gained its own charisma.
Yeah.
We kind of had this philosophy that we want to write characters that are realistic enough that we can't control them. So when we write the story, they start to change the story themselves because what we may have planned was not realistic for what that character might do.
Mm-hmm.
So the story started to morph on its own a little bit, and we started to change elements. And it started to become a very cool story. So I'm very invested in it because I believe it'll be a great idea.
Yeah.
It's going to be very difficult to actually bring the project to completion because we've never done something fully like that. But I think if we can, it'll shock the world because people have not really seen a video game and a role playing game that is any good
Yeah.
that focuses on Christianity. And especially from that perspective, like they won't ever be told what era this takes place in. They'll just know it's a fantasy world.
Yeah.
And if they ask us later, they'll say this is the world before the flood.
Is there do you have a freedom as far as like the choices you make in the game, or is it pretty direct?
It's pretty locked in because the story is so set.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll have choices you'll have some choices, but it won't be choices that will affect like major points of the story.
Yeah.
Because we don't have the ability to program that well to do all that. This is no Mass Effect.
Yeah. Is there any like video games that as far on a storytelling level that you guys are kind of like taking ideas from?
I don't know if we're taking ideas from
Or influence from.
seeing the ideas, but I got inspired by Xenogears. Xenogears is it was released around the same time as Final Fantasy VII, and it was on the PlayStation. And Xenogears is just Xenogears, and it was just a really unique RPG. To me, it was one of the best RPGs ever made.
Yeah.
And so I got a lot of inspiration from that. Final Fantasy VII, but almost anybody who makes RPG is inspired by Final Fantasy VII. And then Chrono Trigger. I would say those are my biggest video game inspirations for that. So yeah, those games, man, you just can't beat it.
What's the appeal with Final Fantasy VII? Like, I've never played it, and I've been so disconnected from Final Fantasy VII, but I hear so much people like rave about it as like a pinnacle game. Like,
well, the thing, all right, so let's just talk about a few things. The first thing that gets you is I think it will be good to listen to the soundtrack of it because the music is that good. Like music itself stands alone. One person said that if Star Wars didn't have the music it had, it would have been a cheesy sci-fi thing.
Yeah.
That would only have appeal within the sci-fi community. It was something about the music that set it apart, and it's something about Final Fantasy VII's music that is really good. So I would say that. I would say the writing itself is good. The characters It was the first time. It was the first time I ever saw a believable black character in Asian media. I gotta tell you, there is no worse place to see black people than in Asian media, boy. Man, they got some racial stereotypes. I love anime and manga and anything, but boy, if you turn on a video game or an anime, every black character is weird as can be, right? And so, this is the first time I ever seen a black character that I actually thought was somebody that I can know. Barrett. So he was just one of the iconic characters. So many iconic characters. And the other thing is, one of the main characters in your party actually dies in the game.
Really?
You can't save him, right? So you lose a main character, and it hits you. Like, there are a lot of people who said when they first found out that this character died, that they cried.
Were you one of them? Or?
Yeah, it was like, so it had an emotional. And then I think the last thing that made the game so good was the villain is so cool. The villain is like, he's probably one of the coolest video game villains ever made. And so there's a lot of people who are fans of that villain. And I think when you make a villain that people either love or are super entertained by, you got a good game. Yeah. Because a villain you should make a villain with the same attention that you should give the hero.
Yeah,
like,
definitely.
You think, how can I make him have some kind of appeal? Because he's not a good villain if everybody just hates him.
Yeah, that is an interesting point. It is something that I've missed in movies lately. Just villains are just, they're just not interesting. Like, I can't remember the last villain that I was like, damn, that's a bad dude, you know?
Well, think about Satan, right? Everybody loves Satan. People might say they don't like Satan, but at the end of the world, you know, according to scripture, everybody gonna be following the Antichrist. He's gonna be the villain. So the villain is more popular than the hero in the Bible's thinking. And so we have to make our villains more likable. Because why else would you believe it? And people say, oh, you know, I hate Hitler, this and that. But how did Hitler get all those Germans who were considered to be the most rational people in Europe? How do you get them all to do that crazy stuff? He had to have some kind of charisma. If you don't give your bad guy some charisma, you know, just like Darth Vader, man. People love Darth Vader because they like, man, this dude is cool. I may not agree with him, but he got a cool voice. He got a cool, you know, way of walking. And Darth Vader, man, he got ladies, right? Luke probably wasn't getting the ladies, but Darth Vader, he ain't got no problem. He can walk into the bar and, you know, get some girls. So you want a villain like that. A villain that make you say, you know what? I kind of want to be a little bit like that villain.
Yeah, we can talk about Star Wars if you want.
Yeah, bro, Star Wars, man. Darth Vader, man, he's one of the most iconic villains. And when you think about him, his intelligence and his just his charisma, man, it just he gets, for a lot of people, he gets more love than Luke gets.
Yeah, he is really appealing. He's just cool looking, you know what I mean? He's robotic.
You don't necessarily want your villain to be cute or in that kind of sense appealing. You want him to be an appealing of like, yeah, I know he's bad, but he is cool, man.
Yeah.
He got an edge to him. You don't want him to have that, what's that angsty little edge like the old villain they had in the last Star Wars trilogy.
Yeah, it's a big.
He looked like a teenager who didn't know if he wanted to live or not. Nobody wants that.
Yeah, it's funny too. When I think about Star Wars, the new ones, it's like they were given the ultimate. They could have just done the same thing and people would like it, but they made it just annoying, and now I hate Star Wars now because of it.
Yes, Star Wars used to be one of my favorite. And just like I said, George Lucas, man, I'm telling you, I can't tell you how much I love Star Wars until they messed it up.
What do you feel about the prequels?
I was okay with the prequels.
Yeah.
I didn't love them as much as the originals. But I like that we were back in that world, and I like that they didn't try to take, they didn't go too far. They didn't destroy my feelings of Star Wars. right?
Uh-huh.
It wasn't until episode 7, 8, and 9 that my feelings got destroyed. I'm like, bro, I'm done with this. I don't even think I watched the last one. I was like,
I only watched it because someone I knew wanted to watch it, and they had, so I was like, sure, I'll go with you. But it
I couldn't
was.
even do it, bro. And here's the thing: when you start to put here's the problem with Hollywood and why they have a problem with villains,
Mhm,
because if they're not making a white corporate tycoon, if they're not making somebody who's destroying the environment or somebody
mhm,
that's racist, they don't know how to make a bad guy because they don't know what evil really is.
mhm,
They're good at making gray guys, so they can make Breaking Bad, and that's a very good show. And the reason it's a good show is because the bad guy is the good guy,
mhm.
right? And the good guy is the bad guy. You don't know who is who. You just make compelling characters.
Yeah.
But when you have to make a bad guy or a good guy, they're not the guys you want to go to because they don't know how to do it.
Hmm. I think I brought this up with other people. Like Star Wars, we mentioned Star Wars there's a Christian backbone to the story. Do you think that Hollywood stories have sort of declined as like popular culture's drifted away further from religion?
Yeah, because my dad said it this way. He said Jesus is the best story that ever was made.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you have characters and you look at really how good they are, um, the more that they become like Jesus, the more appealing those heroes are.
Mm-hmm.
And the more the evil guy becomes like Satan, the better a villain he is. And
Mm-hmm.
so when you lose your concept of morality, you lose your ability to make a hero or a villain. You
Mm-hmm.
really do. So the divorcing that our culture has from Christianity, it hurts us artistically. And people have said the same about the Roman Empire. They talked about how the Roman Empire had trash entertainment as it started to fall.
Mm-hmm.
And what had happened was they had lost a sense of morality. Um, they had lost their traditions. And at one point, they were a society that was known for kind of restraining itself a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And then, towards the end, you have the Empress, she goes to the whorehouse so she can sleep with more men. Like, that's where they ended up.
Mm-hmm.
So you have entertainment in the Roman culture as going to the Colosseum and people seeing people actually get killed. So
Mm-hmm.
they had more realistic. They went for realism, but they didn't get art. And I think that's kind of what we're doing now is we're going for realism. You turn on a video game, video games have never looked more real,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Video games have never had more technology. Video games have never had more reactive NPCs.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but there's something missing with the art of some games. Now, some games capture, but some games just miss the art. And
Mm-hmm.
you get to the thing where you start to realize no matter how much technology you have, and you can have the biggest team, but if you don't have the essence of what a story is or the essence of art in the game, your
Yeah.
your your entertainment is trash.
Hmm. You think, I guess, to go back to something you mentioned, or I guess before we started recording, the idea of like Hollywood pushing people to fail. Um, is there any like example that comes to mind that you can think of?
In the sense of what, like where you
Uh,
Hollywood pushing people to fail in what way?
As far as like a recent movie that you can think of that like didn't promote excellence, promoted just people to just, you know, uh, just to fail, or was it the values that the movie?
Well, you know what? I honestly, this is gonna be a weird one,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm gonna say this movie to me was landmark. The movie Armageddon.
Mm-hmm.
In the movie Armageddon, they're trying to save the world from this meteorite that's gonna hit the world, right?
Yeah.
And the whole premise of the movie is we plan to do A, but A went wrong.
Yeah.
And that's the whole premise, right? There's no there's no bad guy. It's just people doing stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And you really don't feel compelled other than this disaster is going to happen next to make whatever they tried to do to fix what they tried to do
Mm-hmm.
not work.
Yeah.
And all movies are starting to become Armageddon, right? They're all becoming I tried to solve this issue, but this went wrong. So now I've done this. Pretty soon, you forget what they even had tried to do from the beginning because you've gone through so many rabbit trails of what's wrong,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you lose any sense. And why would you make a movie like that? You make a movie like that because you lack the morality to make a compelling moral film,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so the reason that Armageddon to me is striking, and I wouldn't say it's a terrible movie, even though to me it was a slightly bad movie, right?
It's pretty
The
bad, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. And the reason that it was so, to me, it was so legendary is because that's, to me, when I started to realize these people, if they're not doing a remake, do they have any ideas left?
Yeah.
Right? And so that's why they started to do comic book movies, I feel, because comic book movies make villains.
Mm-hmm.
And they have these characters now. What do they do with that? They try to social justice it up, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So then they try to make Captain Marvel, and you'll have all these female characters and all these female heroes. Oh, they all strong, but you never see them get hit,
Yeah.
right? So you'll have a female character, and she's so strong, but it's amazing to me that you could have the attitude of a feminist and the attitude of a white knight at the same time, right? So you think women so strong they can do anything a man can do, but I'll never show a woman get hit because that's just deplorable, right?
Yeah.
And so what people have to confront is, here's this to me: if you're going to be a feminist, you have to accept that women can get hit,
Mm-hmm.
right? At least in art. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
saying that you go to somebody's house and you should be hitting women. My point is, if you're portraying women in combat situations in art,
Mm-hmm.
they have to take hits for the story to be realistic.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not willing to do that, don't make women heroes.
Yeah.
And so when you're not willing to do that because of your social justice leanings, you have sacrificed the story because of your ideals.
Mm-hmm.
And so your ideals are messing up art. And I think anytime that your ideals are messing up art, there's something wrong with your ideals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Interesting point. Okay. Let's let's get into something I've been just curious to ask a pastor or anyone that's, worked within the church. How do you feel about Roe v. Wade in general? Not the abortion aspect of it, but just as it stands as, letting states decide for themselves uh, to make laws about this.
I'm torn.
Mm-hmm.
I'm torn because the thing about Roe v. Wade, I am, if the Supreme Court does overturn this decision, I'm happy in the sense that it will allow some states to make abortion illegal.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm unhappy in the sense that anybody thinks that this is a final battle,
Mm-hmm.
because this just kicks the ball down the road. Some states, like my state, Wisconsin, has a law that was like in 1848 that made abortion illegal. And when Roe versus Wade gets overturned, that law will be in effect.
Mm-hmm.
But other states, like your state or Illinois or New York, they don't have those laws. They've already pushed pro-abortion laws.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really not going to change much for a lot of people. People have said, well, we're not going to be able to get an abortion in certain places. That's already been the case,
Mm-hmm.
right? In my state, you can't get an abortion except for in Milwaukee or Madison,
Mm-hmm.
two biggest cities in the state. So all of a sudden, what is that going to do? That's going to push people to go to Chicago or go to Rockford to get their abortion.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's going to be impossible for you to get it. You're just going to travel.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't see that it changes a whole lot. But I think people can think that they had a moral victory, not realizing that they really didn't accomplish much. So in that sense, it's a danger. It lulls people into the sense that they've accomplished something, but they didn't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we're not careful. If you're somebody that's against Roe versus Wade, if you're not careful, you're going to slowly start to realize that more people are getting abortions because more states are legalizing it than you even thought was possible.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm happy that they're making a right decision and overturning a bad decision that was made, over 50 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But to think that it actually accomplishes a whole lot, I'm not so sure.
What do you feel? Not as far as like what do you feel about abortion, but what do you think? Just any societal effects abortion has done to, to our country, or not to our country, just sort of in our culture, I guess.
Well, I think one of the things it's done is it has pushed us. So let's just think about it. A couple of things what abortion has done.
Mm-hmm.
One thing it's done is it has pushed people to close their eyes. So what abortion does is people don't want to look at what they're actually doing
Mm-hmm.
to a child. They will, if you actually show people pictures of an abortion, most people will turn around and throw up.
Mm-hmm.
But they'll do it in a second. So they just don't want to see the viciousness that they're doing. And what it has done is it's kind of pushed the viciousness of it away from polite company.
Mm-hmm.
People just have abortions and they don't talk about what they're doing, so they're divorced from the impact of what they're actually doing. They don't understand the violence that they're actually instituting.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, um, people are in the sense of delusion. And there's a few delusions. One of the delusions is if you look at Planned Parenthoods throughout the nation, a lot of them are in the Black community. Um, and it kind of takes, if you study Planned Parenthood, it was a very racist organization.
Yeah.
They wanted to kill more Black babies than they wanted to kill white babies. That was really their point.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what is done, because people close their eyes to what's going on in their own girl's belly, of course they're going to close their eyes to the history of it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They're going to close their eyes to whether there's a life at all. People have made this thing where it's my body, my choice. Is that really what abortion hinges on?
Mm-hmm.
Is that really? Because the real question should be not whether it's your body, your choice, but is that a life or is it not? Is it a human being or if it's not?
Mm-hmm.
If it's human, then it's really not your body.
Mm-hmm.
And people have tried to sway the debate. And because of that, you've gotten to the point now where I think people, they become so divorced from reality. So on one hand, you got some people divorced from reality.
Mm-hmm.
They want to set the premise of the argument somewhere where the argument actually is not, right?
Mm-hmm.
They want to say, hey, should women be able to do what they want with their bodies? That's not even the question, right?
Mm-hmm.
So on one hand, you have that. On the other hand, I've gone to the abortion clinic in this last week. Actually, I was there today. And when I was there and I was talking to ladies about aborting their child, they were literally telling me, yeah, I already killed my child. So you got to a point where it used to be in the past and people would just say, well, I just remove some fetal tissue,
Mm-hmm.
right? I got a family member of mine who believes in abortion, and she will constantly say, she will not use the term baby. She will not use the term baby. She's very careful to say that because she does not want to act like it's a human life.
Mm-hmm.
But these ladies did not agree with her. These ladies were coming out of the abortion clinic saying, I killed my baby already, and you can't do anything to persuade me otherwise.
Yeah.
That's what they told me. And so you got to the point where people are admitting, yeah, I murdered. So what?
Yeah.
It's vicious. And so we've got to a society now where, hey, I don't see a baby anymore because I don't want to. I can disassociate myself from reality.
Yeah.
Right? It's no different than the transgender issue. I can look, it used to be you hold a baby up, you look between the baby's legs, you can tell that's a boy, that's a girl, right?
Yeah.
But we can disassociate ourselves from reality, and we can look at that and we can say, it could be a boy, but he could choose to not be. Right? Is that any scientific basis to that? Are we looking at chromosomes when we say that? Are we looking at organs when we say that? Are we looking at testosterone levels when we say that? No. We're just looking at I just have an idea.
Yeah.
I want to be something different. And somehow that changes reality, right? So disassociating yourself from reality is what we're experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
Truth doesn't even matter. So we're living in a postmodern world where truth is what you make of it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's weird that, you know, many years people have sort of criticized Christianity as, or Christians as some people that like to believe in some kind of myth so they can feel good. But it's weird to see the other side of it and people sort of doing the same thing. Like they want to believe more based on feelings rather than and instead of accepting reality. It's weird how that's kind of flipped.
That's because it never, the truth of the matter is it never did. It was always that way, right? Like
Yeah.
if you look at these people, the idea that there is no God, that's just your fantasy, right? That's just your fantasy. Now, can people fantasize about creating a God of their own liking? Yes, they can.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea that there's nobody that you can be held accountable to, that this life just has no purpose whatsoever, that nobody put us on this planet for any kind of purpose, that we're just floating around here in space for no reason,
Mm-hmm.
that's fantasy, right? That's fantasy. And so we have we've taken we have decided that we can determine what the world is with our
Mm-hmm.
own mind. And that in its own sense is deciding that we're going to believe in a reality where we're God.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I could be a man, I could be a woman. And I don't see how that has anything to do with reality, but people don't care. It's a form of madness. And I know people will say, well, that's kind of harsh for you to say that, Brian, that you say these people are mad. They're insane. But how do you know that you were supposed to be born a woman if you've never been a woman?
Yeah.
Right? How could that's obviously that's a place of irrationality to believe that you are something that you never have been.
Yeah, definitely. Do you think that, I'm not a religious person,
Mhm.
um, but do you think that someone like me can live their life not necessarily avoiding religion, but just, you know, uh, just never really devoting themselves to it? Can they still, do you think they could still live a happy life?
I think you could live a happy life doing anything that you want.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that you're going to live a more fulfilled life if you recognize truth of Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
Because I believe here's the thing. I think that there are some things that we can't explain without some kind of spiritual reality to it.
Mm-hmm.
And when you understand that, it's just to me, one of the biggest things of seeing a spiritual reality is seeing a dead body.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You go up to that casket, you start to realize that's not that person.
Yeah.
Now, what animates that person is more than just the electrical signals that are in that body. It's something more. And when you recognize that whatever you call that, whether that be a soul, whether it be a spirit, that is something that is real.
Mm-hmm.
When you recognize that, you start to realize there has to be more to explain that unseen reality that we all experience and we know is there because we've seen a dead body and we've seen a live body.
Mm-hmm.
And so that will lead you to be more fulfilled because you'll have more of the truth. To me, it's like when you play a video game. You play a video game and you only got the 60% completion,
Yeah.
right? You could be happy that you beat that game,
Yeah.
but you
Yeah.
still wonder, man, where's that other 40%?
Yeah. Yeah. I got you.
And I think that's what happens. I think when you don't have religion, you could still have a good game.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't have 100% completion.
That's one of the best analogies I've heard.
You know, we got to say it in gamer terms, man.
Yeah. So you think it's just more so you think of just missing out on something?
I think you're missing out, and I think you're missing out on fulfillment. To me, it's just like another way of putting it is, let's say you go through life and you never find true love. Can you still be happy? I
Mm-hmm.
believe you can. I don't think romantic life is everything,
Mm-hmm.
but I think there's something about family that is intensely important and provides a lot of meaning.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why most people seek out for it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Most people do want it because they know it's fulfilling. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think it's the same with this. It's for some people they can't find the right one.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't find the right one, hey, it's just like a lady. You can't find the right lady, then it's better to be alone.
Mm-hmm.
When you do find that right one, you'll find that your life is more fulfilled. And I say the same thing with truth and religion, right? When you find the truth, then you'll be like, man, this made life so much better. But when you find the wrong one, whew, you'll be like Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, boy. A court case can't put
Yeah.
that together, baby.
You heard about the whole what she left in his bed thing, right?
That she left a turd in his bed?
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been following this trial kind of closely. I never have followed one of these celebrity trials ever in my life. This one I'm actually following. It's really crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy. You know, here's the thing, and this is what I was talking about earlier. And I was talking about how before we had started recording, we talked about how men are bad, women are worse, right? In our society right now, men are bad. Don't get me wrong. They doing some stuff they shouldn't be doing, right? When we go out and we see men doing stuff, you're like, my goodness, bro, what's wrong with you, right? But women right now are restrained. And so we have a situation now where we'll have Amber Heard, will she ever be truly held accountable for all the
Yeah.
right? Because she could never give Johnny Depp his life back.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is he a perfect dude? He's a weirdo too, bro. He was drugged
Yeah.
out. He had all kind of stuff going on, but he didn't deserve what happened to him. And
Yeah.
for her to get on that, you know, that soapbox that she did and pretend that she was a victim of something when she was instituting just as much violence as he was, that is crazy. But you know what? The only reason she thought she can get away with it because she's a woman. That's the only way. It would never went the other way.
Yeah. I guess before we close, let's talk about a subject that your brother brought up a little bit on his episode of this idea of promoting masculine Christianity. How would you explain masculine? Like, how would you explain it? What masculine Christianity is?
Masculine Christianity is Christianity that is unafraid to make judgments of right and wrong. To say that without compromising it is not to say that there's not love to be said, but it's saying that we're going to make a Christian argument. Now, what does it mean to make a Christian argument? It means that Christianity stops being this emotional appeal and starts to become a rational argument. And that makes it more masculine. What happens when we have this feminine Christianity is we will have people make emotional appeals, and it stops appealing to guys like you, right? Guys like you are leaving the church in droves. Why? Because they feel that the church is just a whole bunch of emotional appeals to get their money to be used on stuff that they don't understand, to make a message that they don't believe, to do stuff that's completely unnecessary. That's what they believe the church is. And I can't blame them because most churches are like that, right? But masculine Christianity tries to make a rational argument for Christianity. It tries to make Christianity a set of logical statements, and then it abides by those. So that's a difference between masculine Christianity and feminine Christianity.
what would you say is a rational Christian argument regarding anything, I guess?
Yeah, a rational Christian argument will be something to the effect that, let's just say this, that God created a law, a moral law,
Mm-hmm.
and all laws come from that moral law,
Mm-hmm.
right? This is a rational argument. Why? Because every society has some moral laws,
Mm-hmm.
right? They had to come from somewhere. Where those moral laws came from, they came from God. Now, have those laws been corrupted in some ways in certain societies? Yes, they have. But the idea of a moral law, right, that there is a universal moral truth, an objective moral truth
Mm-hmm.
that is not determined by our feelings, it is independent of our time, society, or feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that objective moral law will be held to account to that moral law, what we do on this earth, whether that be good or evil. That moral law is described in the Bible. Now, whether you believe that or not, we can examine it. Right? Now, we can look at the history of the Bible and say, why do we believe that this is the word of God and not the Quran, not this book, not that book? And we have rational arguments to say, where did this book come from? Why do I believe it?
Mm-hmm.
Why would I believe this collection of 66 books written by 40 authors? Why would I believe that? And I have to make a rational argument as to why I believe that. I believe it because I've studied it. Right? I believe it because it's internally consistent. I believe it because I've seen the alternatives. I
Mm-hmm.
believe it because I have a presuppositional argument, right? My presuppositional argument is to assume that what you're arguing is true and look at the consequences of assuming that it's true,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so when you make those kind of arguments, Christianity is internally consistent. Whereas when you examine other people's arguments, their arguments start to become internally inconsistent. And
Mm-hmm.
anything that is internally inconsistent is irrational and shouldn't be believed. And so we're
Um,
going to those kind of arguments.
um, uh, can you think of a specific point as to like when you'd say Christianity became more and more, like you said, feminine or more emotions based?
I think it's hard for me to say because I haven't been around long enough. Um,
Or
I
I
think
mean, anything that you sort of noticed when it sort of like became more emotional based?
I would say some people would target it towards at the beginning of the charismatic movement, right?
Mm.
So charismatic movement of Christianity, you had this thing where people just felt that whatever that they could somehow feel God in the almost like in the ether, right? They just raised their hands. Ooh, that was God right there. He told me to do that.
Yeah.
And it wasn't based on anything rational.
Mm-hmm.
And when people started to accept that God could speak in some way that nobody else could check or confirm,
Mm-hmm.
that started an irrational Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
And it used to not be like that. It used to be that in the past, if you had something that you said was from God, it had to be confirmed.
Mm-hmm.
How would it be confirmed? It either had to match with what we already have in the book or it had to match what we already knew was true. Whereas now somebody will just come up with something. Oh, I just felt that God was telling me this. How do you know that? Right. That question is foreboding. They'll be like, whoa, you asking them why? See, but in rational Christianity, we don't do that. You say, hey, God told me to do this. How do you know God told you to do that?
Mm-hmm.
That's gonna be the first question those brothers gonna ask you. But they're not gonna let you get away with that bull of saying, oh yeah, I just think God told me that. Why you think that? I just think it. Nope, nope. You can't confirm it. Nope, I'm not going with you. You could jump off the bridge on your own.
Mm.
Right. So that's how people start drinking Kool-Aid and going to camps and doing all that stuff, giving lives and all that stuff. Yeah, that comes from that.
Yeah.
Right. Unconfirmed power,
Mm-hmm.
unchecked power. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's always been some emotional side to Christianity. And that we'll never be able to take that completely away, but that should never be why we should believe.
Mm-hmm.
Right. You should never believe anything because of emotions.
Mm-hmm.
It should always be based off of some kind of logic or some kind of rationality.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime that I believe something just because of emotions, I've always regretted it.
Yeah. All right. I guess we should be winding down. Is there anything that you had any curiosities about that you wanted to bring up, or you think we
Yeah,
kind of got
bro.
it?
Where'd you get the name Critical Introverts, man?
Well, to keep it simple, when I first had the idea for the show, I contacted a couple of the artists, and we did like a little quick meeting, and we all noticed that we were all pretty introverted people. So, and we were, critical of what was going on. So it just sort of just kind of named itself the Critical Introverts.
So, there you go.
And uh, I think it has a bigger meaning. That you know, like you're someone on a mainstream level that doesn't really have that much of a representation. There's no Netflix show that's giving your point of view. So in some way, like you are part of the critical introverts. Like you're someone who's critical who doesn't really have that much of a voice on a mainstream platform. So um, I guess on that level, like it has a more universal meaning. As I've grown the show, like I've kind of realized that, and like that's why I've been reaching out to just not just artists, but just interesting people that like have points of view that they don't really get a chance to. Like I said, like Netflix or Hulu or whatever, they're never gonna have a show or anything that's going to present
Yeah,
a point of view that like yours, or because it's becoming so like one dimensional on mainstream that it's just
Mhm.
becoming so boring to me.
Yep.
So like I find doing this so much more fun than scrolling on Netflix to see what show I'm not going to be interested on, you know what I mean? So
Hmm. I'm with you, man, because that's my wife. She like, man, let's go look at something on Netflix. I'm like, oh my goodness, let me just go chill with Critical Introverts, man. We gonna talk about something.
I do know there is one show I would recommend on Netflix. It's an older show, but it's a show that not a lot of people know about. It's called Kingdom. It's
Okay.
um it's a really interesting show. It's like a zombie show, but it's based in like ancient Japan. So it's think like ninjas fighting zombies, and it sounds silly, but the
Yeah.
show takes it rather seriously. So I think it is a comic, but yeah, I think I would definitely recommend that to anyone because it was one of
Okay.
the last really good shows I saw on that. So yeah, I don't even know where that came from, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I'm about to check it out, bro. I'm gonna check it out. What about manga or anything? You've been reading any comic books or something recently?
Uh, I never really been into comics. I mostly like collect music and just
Yeah.
collect art. I've been slowly getting back into video games like the last or so years.
Yeah.
Uh, I think the last time I was into video games was like Nintendo 64 days.
Yep. Yep.
So it's like it's nice. It's like I took a break from it, then I came back, and I'm just like it's insane now. Like the graphics are
Yep.
just insane, and the games are so much more complex now. Like you have
Hmm.
to literally like do you play like any newer games now? Or
Yeah, man. You almost had to have a guide before you even play the game.
yeah, like it's trippy. Like there's games that you have to watch your character's stamina. Like your character literally gets
Mhm.
tired. You know
Yep.
what I'm saying? So
Mario used to run forever, man. And now
yeah,
you
yeah. Now they have to have a breather, and it's just like how wow, this is insane.
yeah. I remember I knew I was done with games being so realistic when I played a Grand Theft Auto game.
Uh-huh.
My friend kept calling me in that game, and I'm like, "This is why I put the game on so people will stop texting and calling me." And I in the game,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
texting and calling me like I can't get away from them.
Yeah.
I was like, there's a point where you could be so realistic that's actually annoying.
Yeah. Yeah, that's like games are yeah, just insane now. But I'm playing mostly like fantasy kind of games, like when you're like fighting dragons and stuff like that.
Mhm.
There's some games that are like a little too real, like detective based games, which I mean I don't know. I have to escape somehow, so I need some
Yeah, that's me.
fantasy.
When I read books, I read fantasy books because I don't want to read a true crime book. I don't want to read about somebody being attacked or something.
Yeah, yeah. um, I guess I mean anything. I mean I'm all out of questions.
Yeah,
Any
bro. Well,
other?
I appreciate your time, man. We'll definitely have another one of these conversations. All right.
Yeah, cool. I guess before we go, you want to just plug the Zeal Brothers? You want to plug anything?
Not, we got Zeal Brothers. We're still putting out content out there, so definitely if you, like what you're hearing here, definitely subscribe to us. And
Mm-hmm.
um, we're putting out we're reacting to a lot of different things that are happening out there.
Mm-hmm.
And then, check out the Wag's Warrior of Truth
Mm-hmm.
comic book that my brother is promoting. Um, it's very good, and it's a realistic approach to what Christians view of as spiritual warfare.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want people to check it out. Even if you're not a Christian, you're going to be intrigued by how the world is,
Mm-hmm.
because it's not a cookie cutter Christian entertainment. It's not, sitting there and you sit there every end of every chapter is saying, it has a prayer and you like, oh my goodness, let me skip a few pages.
Yeah. I forgot to ask you about your brother's motion comics because I've seen a few and they're pretty awesome. So
Yeah,
yeah. I guess maybe next time maybe I can have you and him
yeah,
on. That'd be
yeah,
fun.
yeah. Let him talk about that because he's the expert for that. I just
Yeah.
try to write some of the story with him.
All right, I guess we'll end it there. My name is I'm Senor Filth. Thank you to my guest Brian, part of the Zell Brothers, and we'll see you another time. Thank you for watching.
Take it
Peace.
easy.